welcome back to the Good Success Podcast. I am your host, Josh Culler, and today we got a very, very special guest on the show with us. This is Quincy Long. It's H. Quincy Long officially, right?
That's right.
All right, awesome. So Quincy is actually with Quest IRA, and he is a longtime friend of the entire Good Success team, but especially Tom Olson. You guys have been buddies for a while now. And Quincy actually, so I'm going to briefly introduce how we know Quincy, and then I'm going to have him fully introduce himself. But we know Quincy through our network that we have, and especially with the Financial Friends Network, and then the whole cruise that Tom goes on and everything. So we got a good relationship with you there. But Quincy actually came to our Good Success Mastermind in May and officially joined. So that's super exciting. Quincy, what did you think of the Mastermind? Was it good?
It was. I kind of felt like I should call it a mini mind for me, but for most of it was an incredible, very good thing. I find that people don't really understand what a mastermind is, but this was definitely a classic one.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate those kind words, and we're super excited to have you in the group. I think it's going to be, there's a lot of wisdom between Quincy's ears, so we're excited about bringing that into the room. So I'm going to circle back around to have Quincy introduce himself fully here in just a second. But before that, we're going to talk about a few things. So we did have our May Mastermind a few weeks ago, which Quincy just joined with us. And our next Mastermind event is going to be in August 9, 10, 11. And it's actually going to be in Maryville, Indiana, which is right in our backyard at a country club that Tom Olson, the president of Good Success, is actually a part of. And so we're very excited about that. It's going to be very close to home here. And we're excited about the group that we have together. We've got a few new signups, including Quincy here. And it's going to be, we've already put together a really good group of guys that we're super excited about. And it's turning out to be really good. So August 9, 10, 11, Kevin is on the links right now, and he's going to be linking that below, goodsuccess.com/mastermind. You can go there and check it out. Check out a little bit more information about the actual mastermind, see some testimonials and all kinds of stuff on there, and then the actual information about the next event. So if you guys are interested, go there, but you have to fill out an application. So make sure you fill that out, and then we'll get Jared Stoltmeister, who's our gatekeeper for the Good Success Mastermind, on the phone with you, and then he'll have a little bit of conversation. Make sure that you're a good fit for the mastermind. We don't let just anybody in the group. They have to be a lot like Quincy. They have to be givers, but they also a lot like Quincy. There's not a lot of people like Quincy, but there's enough. So we only take people that are going to be givers, that are going to bring value to the actual room, and then also we do vet the number of deals that you're doing as well. So, but also your character. So that's the Good Success Mastermind, goodsuccess.com/mastermind. You guys can go to that. Kevin's going to have it linked below. And then also our Community Go Giver event, which Quincy is actually going to be speaking at as well in July 25, 26, and 27. Quincy just can't get enough of us. So that's why he's going to be there speaking, and it's a very exciting time. So it's going to be a 3-day event, and it's just going to be a straight education. We're very excited about this. We're actually teaming up with Walter Walford and the Financial Friends Network to do this event and put this on. And so you guys can go to communitygogiver.com. We only have a grand total of 80 seats available, and that is it. We're selling out at 80 seats. That's as many seats as we can get in the actual building. It's actually going to be happening at our office in Gary, Indiana. So we're very excited about that. You guys go to communitygogiver.com to sign up now. Seats are selling out fast. We only have a few available, so make sure you guys go check that out now. And prices do go up here in a few days, so make sure you go click on that after you have watched this live stream. So thank you guys for checking it out. So without further ado, so before we get into this, Quincy, I'm going to have you introduce yourself here in just a second, tell people who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it. But Quincy has a little bit of time, wisdom gap between him and myself. So it's like 5 or 6 years, something like that, right?
Something like that,
yeah. Yeah. You don't look a day over like 30. So I mean, we're good to go. So anyway, but Facebook Live, if you guys are watching right now, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you're giving thumbs up, leave comments below, and then share this around. And then if you missed the Facebook Live, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. And if you're coming to us by way of knowing Quincy and not, if you guys don't know who we are, thank you guys for joining. We do have a podcast. This is episode 107. So you guys subscribe to it. We're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. So without further ado, Mr. H. Quincy Long, give us a brief introduction of yourself. Tell us people who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it.
Sure. So my name is, as you said, H. Quincy Long, and basically I'm president of a company called Quest IRA Inc. And Quest IRA is the premier provider of self-directed IRA services in the country. We'll talk about what that means as we go along here, I think. Mm-hmm. And I'm also an attorney in Texas, and I've been a fee attorney for a title company, so I know a lot about real estate. I'm a certified IRA services professional, which means I know the IRA rules, not just self-direction. Mm-hmm. I've been a fee attorney for American Title Company. I've written a whole lot of stuff that's mostly published online that you can go to and review. And daddy of 2 girls, one graduated from high school in a few days and the other graduating from college in December. Yay, I get a pay raise.
Nice.
And, dog and a cat and a wife of 34 years. That's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And how long have you been working with the self-directed IRAs?
About 15 years.
15 years. Awesome. So that's a brief introduction for you guys. Quincy, you guys have a website, questira.com. Is that correct?
Exactly. www.questira.com. And that's QUESTIRA.com.
Awesome. So before you guys go to that, Kevin's actually going to have that link below. But before you guys go to that, we are going to talk a little bit about self-directed IRAs to give you guys a brief understanding of what this actually means. So Quincy, I've got some very specific questions for you, but before we get into them, let's give a little bit of a foundation about what self-directed IRAs are. Now, I myself am not very educated. I know the 1,000-foot view of what self-directed IRAs are, but this is going to be very educational for me as well. So if you guys have questions, comment them below and we'll make sure we get them over to Quincy later on after the actual live stream. So Quincy, self-directed IRA, if you could give us a brief foundation of what that actually is and what it means to have that.
Sure. And let's start by saying that we say self-directed IRAs, but it's actually 7 different types of accounts that can be self-directed. So that would be the traditional IRA. That's the one everybody kind of puts money in, and mostly you get a tax deduction for putting the money in there. But when you pull it out, it's taxed income, right? And you got the Roth IRA, which is everybody goes, yay, the Roth IRA. And that's because even though you don't get a deduction for putting the money in there, when you pull it out in a qualified distribution, it's tax-free. So it's a way to accumulate wealth and then get access to it tax-free, primarily when you're over age 59 and a half. Then we have the 3 employer plans, the SEP IRA, the Simple IRA, and for those of you who have self-employment income and no employees, we can set you up with your own 401k program. Finally, there's the what we call would you like fries with that accounts, and that's the health savings account and the Coverdell Education Savings Account to save for your kids' college or my kids' college. Let me know if you need their account numbers. But that's an important vehicle. Those 2 are important vehicles also. So when we say self-directed IRA, we're including all those 7 different types of accounts when we discuss things.
Gotcha.
As far as what it is, it's basically a way for you to buy alternative investments in your IRA. And what I mean by that is you can buy real estate, you can buy promissory notes, you can buy private company membership interests and stock and whatnot, and a variety of other things. The only 2 things that the IRS tells you cannot invest in are life insurance contracts and collectibles. Everything else is fair game. So you just got to have a company like Quest IRA that's going to be there to administer those non-traditional investments. And that's what we do.
Gotcha. So Quest is basically the manager of your IRA, and you guys, I assume, do consultations about this kind of stuff. And so,
well, we do some, but our position is not to give tax, legal, investment, or structuring advice. What we do is we provide the vehicle. I like to say it like this. We're like the luxury car dealer. We're going to give you the car, the vehicle, but you have to learn how to drive it, which means you have to know your own investment strategy, because we're not going to provide that to you. And you have to put your gas in it, which means you have to put your own money in it.
Yeah.
What we are there for is to provide the vehicle for you to be able to make alternative or non-traditional investments in your IRA.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that segues perfectly into a question I have. So if someone is just starting out with investing in their self-directed IRA, what recommendations do you have for them? So you mentioned several of the actual categories of self-directed IRAs.
Sure.
Which one do you recommend getting into first, and how do you recommend them actually?
Of course, recommending sounds like advice, which I don't do, but I'll tell you what's common. How's that?
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
First of all, let me say something really, really important here. Self-directed IRAs are most effective when you invest in what you know best. So that's the first thing you got to know. What do you know? What do you want to invest in? Are you a real estate professional? Are you, a lender? Just what's your background? Because that using self-directed IRAs to invest in what you know and like and can control the risk on, that's what we're talking about is the best use of them. Now, having said that, what's common? Well, there are people that buy rental property in their IRAs. Of course, that's a hands-off investment. You got to have, you're not going to be able to go do the repairs yourself or anything like that. So they buy real estate is very common. Probably the most common thing that we see is actually promissory notes. Sometimes those notes are secured by assets such as real estate. Sometimes they're secured by something other than real estate. And sometimes if you're really an idiot, I'm sorry, did I say that? Then you can
We'll take that out.
You don't have to take it out because I think it's crazy. But people do loan their money out unsecured by anything but the promise to pay. And as long as the person's not a disqualified person, that's okay. We might think you're wacky, but we'll do it for you.
Yeah. Gotcha. So because our audience is specifically, most of them are specifically geared towards real estate investing. So what kind of deals do you recommend? Like we'll stick on the recommendation side of it. So what kind of deals do you recommend a beginner that has a self-directed IRA? Maybe they just locked it down like yesterday and they got some cash in there. What kind of deals do you recommend them doing, maybe specifically towards the real estate side of things?
Now you're forgetting the part that I don't make advice. So recommend I can't, but what's common for people who are new is to do loans. That's pretty common because it's pretty simple.
Gotcha.
And, some people, as you get more along the curve and gain more experience, they tend to drift off into things like LLCs, trusts, C corporation stock, and that kind of thing. That's usually down the road. Limited partnerships that buy apartment complexes or shopping centers, but usually that comes down the road unless you come with that knowledge to the program. Then that's usually not the first thing. So the first thing that people do usually is either notes or real estate. Gotcha. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's invest in what you know best. So if you know real estate, rental real estate best, then that's the best use of the money.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I apologize for the recommendation type wording. That's no advice on here. This is.
No, I mean the important point here is it's a self-directed IRA.
Yeah.
And the self ain't Quincy.
Yeah.
The owner of the IRA.
Gotcha.
And I said that colloquially on purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the owner of the IRA that directs the account, selects the investments, and decides how to structure those investments.
Gotcha. So now how do you think that somebody should go about staying away from recommendations and advice? So let's just say, for instance, I'm a person that just got a self-directed IRA. Maybe it's a Roth. How should what recommendations do you make that I should actually go and educate myself on? Maybe it is real estate. Like how do people learn and educate themselves on investing with their IRA?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have tons and tons of educational materials on the website, and we attend events all over the country and trying to educate people on self-directed IRAs and what you can do with them, not ranking any recommendations, but what you can do with them. It's not our job to teach you to be an investor, but rather to open your mind to the possibilities of what you can do, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to do. But basically, so you start off with the proposition that you go to, your local, besides our website, as I said, lots of material on there, but you go to your local clubs. Since a lot of what self-directed IRAs deal with is real estate, I say that people often go to real estate clubs and stuff like that. And there's going to be mostly tire kickers there, but there will be people there that know about investing, and there's almost always people that knows about self-directed investing as well. Mm-hmm. So real estate clubs, but really, it's really having to do with this. It's having to do with where do people that do the transactions that you want to do hang out. That's where you go.
Gotcha.
Of course, the main one is Good Success.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Shameless plug. We appreciate that. So what it sounds like to me, what you're saying a lot is it's a relationship built type deal. Possibly, is that safe to say?
Often it is relationship driven. Yes. Okay.
So how do you, when it comes to building a relationship, like obviously you're not just going to say, hey, I want you to teach me where I should put my money. Let's say you're gonna do a deal out of your IRA with Olson Group and maybe buy a turnkey deal or whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you build a relationship like that with somebody in order to trust them enough with the money that you're going to be?
Well, it all has to do with, you may have heard the phrase, it's been often recited, that your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. You need to build and nurture a network, not only just build it, not only just collect business cards, but kind of nurture that along. And there's various ways to do that. You see someone repeatedly, you hear their conversations, you hear their presentations, you hear their issues if you go to the Good Success Mastermind. Mm-hmm. And you can get a pretty good feel for what kind of a person they are. And that's part of your big do the do. That's what I always tell people. You got to do the do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean by that, don't you?
Yes, sir.
That's right. You got to do your due diligence. So once you decide you're comfortable with a particular strategy, then you use your network to start seeing who employs the strategy that you want to use. And then from there, you do your due diligence. And I want to say that if we're starting with loans, for example, if you do your due diligence, there's two parts to due diligence. There's due diligence on the deal, which means you have to check the comparables. You have to see the neighborhood, what it's like. You check the repair list and see if that's a reasonable repair list. After repaired values, the typical stuff that I think everybody would pretty much understand.
Right.
And then the second part is, and I had to learn this the hard way, you have to check out the person or people that you're dealing with. So when I did a deal with Tom's group, I knew Tom for years and I knew he was a good Christian man and whatnot. But that didn't mean I didn't go and get a copy of the deed of trust that he was going to use and contact an Indiana attorney and understand whether he had title insurance and all that kind of stuff. So I did my due diligence even on somebody that I've known for several years.
Yeah, gotcha. And but it's still the foundation that you built with them, but then following that up with the due diligence is very, very key. So yeah, right. Very good stuff. So kind of like another great, because I assume that there's been times where people didn't do their due diligence on either of those.
Oh, it happens, yes.
So that's probably a very clean statement to make. What are some pitfalls and maybe some mistakes that you've seen over the years that people have made that have very seriously hurt them in some way, shape, or form? And then how did it hurt them? What was the cause and the effect, and then how it actually hurt them?
Well, okay, so besides the due diligence, which we see a lot of people not doing proper due diligence, some classic mistakes that we see repeatedly. And the first one is the one that I hope, have now convinced yourself is not the case. It's Quincy directed, not self-directed.
Right.
So you got to understand that when it's a self-directed IRA, the good part is you're free to invest in whatever you know best. Almost completely, not completely, because there are certain things that are administratively infeasible for us to handle. But for the most part, you've got a free hand, right? The bad thing is we're not going to provide you with investments. We're not going to provide you with advice. We're not going to babysit you and say, hey, Josh needs money. Why don't you go talk to him? Mm-hmm. None of that's going to happen. So some clients just move their money over. They're all excited about self-direction, and then they do nothing. So that's one mistake that we see frequently. And another mistake that we see is that people don't understand that there are rules you got to play by. And those are generally called prohibited transactions. And that's just what it sounds like. These things that you do with certain people are not permitted to be done with the IRA. And if you do those within the IRA blows up and becomes taxable money along with a lot of potential penalties. Wow. So you got to understand who is disqualified from doing business with your IRA and what you can't do with those people.
Yeah.
But let me just give you a brief summary. I can't go over the whole thing because we'd be here for an hour or more just discussing that topic.
Yeah.
And so the disqualified people are, again, these are people that the IRS deems are just too close for you to have an arm's length transaction, which is what they're looking for in an IRA. An arm's length means that it's not going to benefit you or any other disqualified person, either directly or indirectly, except for, of course, the fact that you own the IRA and can take distributions from the IRA at a later time.
Gotcha. So that basically means whoever if you work for somebody. So I work for Tom, I can't lend money out of my IRA directly to Tom's company. Is that accurate?
Let me go over real quickly. This is not an exclusive list, but the most troublesome ones are that you cannot benefit or do transactions with yourself and your IRA, with your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, your kids, their kids, and all of their spouses, all are going to be disqualified from doing business with your IRA. Then if any combination of those people own a corporation, partnership, trust, or estate, then that corporation, partnership, trust, or estate is disqualified from doing business also. And if that's true, then 10% or more shareholders, key employees, managers, directors of that entity all come into play and are all disqualified persons. So that's a very short summary. And then once you get the list of naughty persons, disqualified persons, you can't do things with them. You can't interact with them or benefit them. So that would include buying or selling or transferring a piece of property or an asset between an IRA and a disqualified person, extending credit between an IRA and a disqualified person, providing goods, services, and that's a real hairy one right there, or facilities between an IRA and a disqualified person. And you can't do anything that make any use out of or benefit from the income or assets of the plan to any of those people. And then there's fiduciary conflict of interest rules too. For example, a clear example would be if you're a real estate broker or agent, you can't represent your IRA and get paid a commission, even if it's paid by a third party, because you're representing the IRA and getting a benefit yourself personally. So you have those kind of rules. That's a real quick summary.
Right.
So the way I tell people to analyze it is, if you have to ask yourself the question, is this person disqualified for me, or is this a prohibited transaction? You probably answered your question.
Yeah.
Because if you have to ask that question, and then the answer is probably in some way, shape, or form it is.
Right.
Really, the mistake that people make is that they don't understand that there's rules you have to play by, and they're easy to play by those rules, but you have to know the rules to play by them, and that's why we do provide a lot of education on that subject.
So all of everything that you just mentioned there is educational content that you guys have on your website. Okay. So it's not something that people have to remember, or even like, obviously they need to go do their due diligence, which we've talked about.
Right.
So they need to educate themselves on that. But let's say, for instance, and this might be a dangerous question. Let's say, for instance, that I do go forward with that. Now what happens? I know that you mentioned that the IRA blows up.
Right.
But like what's the situation? So let's say I lend the money to my sister who owns a nice business and
well, technically that's a good example, because technically your sister is not on the naughty person list. But having said that, you are on the list, and there's always one disqualified person, at least in every transaction, and that's you, because you're a fiduciary or a caretaker for Mr. Ira's funds.
Okay.
And so if you loan money to somebody in whom you have an interest which would affect your best judgment as a fiduciary, that could be deemed to be an indirect benefit back to you.
Oh, gotcha.
So it gets kind of complicated, and again, we don't have time on a simple podcast to go over it. But what happens if you do it? Well, first of all, they generally don't catch you for a number of years. And then all that money you thought you were accumulating up tax-free, you were supposed to pay taxes on that money. And so there's penalties and all kinds of stuff like that. Also, the person who, if there's a disqualified person that's involved in the transaction, they also suffer penalties and can be 15% of the amount involved for every year it's outstanding, and 100% additional penalty for any disqualified person involved in the prohibited transaction.
Wow.
Finally, you can get your IRA disqualified as an IRA even in bankruptcy court. It doesn't even have to be the IRS that declares it to be not an IRA. The bankruptcy court have said they have the authority to determine that an IRA is not an IRA, and if it's not an IRA, it's subject to grabbing by the creditors. So there's just all kinds of things. It's best to learn the ropes and then stay away from the prohibited transaction rules.
Right. So obviously, like we said, you got to do your due diligence on that. So there's a lot of educational content that's on their website for that. But let's say that there is, so the example I gave of lending my money to my sister's successful business seemed like it was a little bit of a hairy situation. So if, let's say, for instance, that's not an educational piece of content, that specific scenario is not on the website that's training you, do your clients, are they able to give you guys a call and say, hey, is this
absolutely.
what I'm able to do?
I mean, we take calls all the time because we're not trying to fund prohibited transactions.
Right.
And our staff is trained to look out for them. Of course, not every prohibited transaction is inherently obvious. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we would never know if you loan money to, let's just change it to your dad's company or something, which would be a prohibited transaction. And it was called, Lopez Construction. I mean, we would never know that was a prohibited transaction. Certainly, if you ask, we'll tell you or educate you as to what issues you might want to go over with your own lawyer. So we're not going to give you the advice, but we also have the right to determine any particular transaction that's administratively infeasible. And that means that if we think it's prohibited, we're not going to do the transaction if we can detect something that looks prohibited.
Right.
And that annoys our clients sometimes, but we're really just saving them.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And by the way, if I ever start the phrase with an answer to a question with a phrase, well, I can't give you tax, legal, investment, or structuring advice. I'm about to give you tax, legal, investment, or structuring advice, but I'm not taking responsibility for it.
Disclaimer. We're going to have a disclaimer on the actual description. Kevin's going to link that below right now. So let's go ahead. We got a few more questions here that I'm going to wrap up with, and we're going to let you go, Quincy. So first of all, if you guys are on the Facebook live stream, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. Make sure you guys are giving this video a big thumbs up. Leave comments below, and then also share this around, tag your friends, and make sure that they join in on this. So we're talking about self-directed IRAs, and the man Quincy Long is on here dropping some wisdom on us right now. So when it comes to self-directed IRA, now we're going to dial it back a little bit more. We've gotten a little bit into the nitty-gritties of it. So if somebody wanted to open a self-directed IRA, so let's just say, for instance, I wanted to get it open. Obviously, I'm going to come to questira.com and go there and open it up. What's the best way to actually get that process rolling, the ball rolling down, and start getting things to where I can start using this thing immediately?
Well, I mean, the best thing to do is, we actually like to talk to our clients. It's kind of weird. Some companies try to avoid it with all costs. But I would suggest if somebody was just trying to approach the idea, they go ahead and call our office and just ask to speak to an IRA specialist, because then they're a little higher trained person that can go over your goals, what you want to do. If you say, hey, I want to loan my dad's construction company money, they're going to say, don't do that. Yeah. And so can't give advice, but they can describe the process to you. Of course, if you want to, you're more than welcome to download the Easy Starter Kit from the website. But we usually tell people to, call and set up a consultation.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome to hear. So it sounds like it's pretty easy.
It's not too bad.
That's good. Good stuff. So so we talked about pitfalls and things to kind of avoid that sometimes can get a little hairy, but at the same time, you got Quest to answer questions for you guys. Is there anything that's maybe a tip or a trick that you can give us that you have found works best with self-directed IRAs? Maybe it's a specific type of deal. Like, obviously you're not giving legal advice here or any kind of advice, but maybe something that you found that works well for you when it comes down to actually investing with your IRA.
Well, I mean, I think some of the important things you want to consider doing is, first of all, some of this depends on your level of sophistication as an investor, right? Mm-hmm. But some of the things you might want to consider is when and how and whether to do a Roth conversion, because you move it from a traditional IRA where you're going to be taxed on the money when it comes out to a Roth IRA where you have to pay the taxes on the on the acorn, but you don't have to pay taxes on the oak tree, which is your balance after years of investing. So Roth conversions are one strategy that I think people need to explore more, especially now that you can't undo the Roth conversion. Basically, once you make that decision, it's done, and you can't change it back into traditional. So people need to educate themselves on that.
Gotcha.
So that's one strategy. Another strategy that people employ that I think is underutilized myself is the use of debt finance property. Believe it or not, an IRA doesn't have to pay cash for the assets that they buy. However, there's a little trick to it, and that is that to the extent you have debt on the property, that part of your debt, that's part of your profits, is going to be subject to tax. So in an oversimplified way, if you are 70% debt leverage on average during the year, then 70% of your profits are going to be taxable to the IRA, not to your own personal return, but to the IRA. And they're taxed at fairly high levels. But when you sit down and analyze it, and like I'm in the high tax bracket, and so what if my IRA is also in a high tax bracket, right? Because it would be stupid for me to create income outside of the IRA where it's going to be taxed again and again and again and again, when I could do it in the IRA, get the deal taxed on that, and the next time I don't have to do a taxable deal. Plus, the tax is only imposed on the debt finance portion. So that's kind of an advanced technique that I really think people need to explore more, because people just say, oh, I would never do that. I would never do something to make my IRA pay taxes. But I'm like, well, did you really think about that before you said that?
Yeah, that sounds like a really advanced strategy.
Well, it is, but you're asking.
Yeah.
Final thing I would say is what's really fun is if you inherit an IRA, especially a Roth IRA, and it's seasoned Roth. We don't want to go into the nitty gritty, but if it's seasoned Roth, the person who died had it for more than 5 years, then you can create money and take it out tax-free and penalty-free immediately. And without being 59 and a half. So that's a strategy that really people need to understand. Gotcha. As far as investments, it goes back to what's your comfort level, what you like to do. I mean, I've done some joint ventures on notes. I participated in, I even did a small bank where I owned about 1% of a bank that just sold recently, and, had a quadrupling or a little more than quadrupling of my money. And of course that took over 11 years, but still it wasn't bad because I didn't have to do anything. I've bought into limited partnerships that have done commercial developments, primarily shopping centers. For whatever reason, I've never done an apartment deal. I'm not against them, but I just never gotten the opportunity. But I've done a number of shopping centers, and like to use trusts. Joint ventures are my favorite way of doing things because I'm inherently lazy, and I'm also kind of busy. Yeah. So I like to do deals with other people. And again, it goes back to establishing and nurturing those networks so that you can do deals. I now do deals not only in my backyard in Houston, Texas, but all over the country. But I only do investments where I have boots on the ground, where I have people that I've networked with that I'm sure if I had a problem in Indiana, I could say, Tom, can you help me out in Indiana? And he would find some way to help me. So it broadens your scope, and it really opens up wide what you can invest in and who you can invest with by establishing and nurturing those networks.
Understood. Awesome stuff. So a little bit, how do you make the decision of what type of self-directed IRA you're going to do? So we've talked a lot about Roth. So to me, it sounds like the natural choice would be a Roth IRA, but you mentioned several other types. What's the benefit of a Roth IRA over these other ones, or is there a benefit over the other ones?
I mean, first of all, you have to start with the proposition of where you're moving the money from. If you're just opening the IRA with a contribution, that's fine. Then it depends on what IRA you qualify for. For example, if you're a single person and you have to make less than, well, now I'm forgotten right now the limit for this year, but it's something around 139,000 is the top level of income. I believe that's right. 139,000 is top level. If you make more than that, you have to put it in a traditional IRA. Then you can consider converting it to a Roth. And so it starts with, what do you qualify for?
Right.
The traditional and the Roth IRAs are just nothing more than the fact that you're a working American and have compensation type income. That's all you need. And you need income within the limits, right? Roth has economic limits or modified adjusted gross income limits. And the traditional IRA, actually, believe it or not, doesn't have any limits except for age. So once you reach age 70 and a half, that year and future years, it cannot contribute to a traditional. The SEP, the Simple, and the 401k are all employer-based plans. And the employer can be you yourself as a self-employed person, but you're wearing two hats. You're the employee and the employer. And of course, the Coverdell Education Savings Account is for kids under 18 years of age that, that have parents or grandparents or whoever are saving for their college. And a health savings account, everybody knows what that is. That's actually really the best kind of account to just open, because you get a tax deduction for putting the money in. And when you pull it out, it's tax-free as long as they're qualified medical expenses. So that's the only type of account. The HSA is the only type of account which is tax-free going in, and it's tax-free coming out as long as you use it for medical expenses.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for explaining that. That really actually makes a lot more sense to me now. So that's good. So it really depends on, like you said, the qualification of what you meet. So you talked a little bit about, so for, I believe it was a Roth, you said after $139,000 of income, you can't do a Roth. Did I hear you right on that one?
That's right. You don't qualify to directly put it in. So what I do every year is, we call it informally a backdoor Roth. So I contribute to my traditional, and because I have a plan at work and make above certain income limits, that the contribution to the traditional is not taxed. Not tax deductible is what I'm trying to say. Normally you get a tax deduction when you put money in a traditional IRA. But I don't care, because I immediately then turn around and ask the custodian to convert it to a Roth IRA. And because I didn't take any deduction for putting the money into the account, because I didn't qualify, I also didn't pay any taxes for moving the money into the Roth. So I just take 2 steps to do what I couldn't do in 1 step. So there's ways to get around it like that.
I guess that's another nugget. That's another strategy that you could go with.
Yeah, the IRS doesn't like that too much, but I think at this point they haven't been able to muster the votes to stop it. And in fact, in the recent tax legislation passed by the administration at the end of last year, they said, no, this does not disqualify you from doing a backdoor Roth. Of course, I'm paraphrasing official language. So they make it very clear that it's still good for now. Who knows how long it's going to last, but while it lasts, I'm going to be doing it every year. Yeah.
It sounds like a really good strategy. So we've talked about the process of actually opening your IRA, and then what type of IRA you might want to go after. So what's the dollar amount that you got to put in an IRA in order to get the ball rolling? So is there a limit, or?
Well, we don't have a limit as far as minimum amount you have to put in, but it has to be enough to fund an investment, of course.
Okay, yeah.
And you can pay the fees with your own credit card, so that's another issue. If you want to let the account pay the fees, then you got to have enough for that too. I personally always have my credit card pay the fees, because it's kind of like a donation to the IRA in a way, and we're allowed to do that.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that makes sense. So I think that's all the questions that I have about about an IRA. I'm sure there's tons of other stuff that is out there that people need to educate themselves on. Do your due diligence. We've already talked about that. So to go on their website, questira.com. Kevin's going to have it linked below. So I've got a couple of rounding questions that I normally ask the people that I'm actually interviewing. So the first one is, we're going to turn back the time about 25 years.
Oh,
so
good.
Something that you know now that you wish that you knew back 25 years ago.
It's clear what I wish I knew back then, besides about self-directed IRAs, but that's kind of an obvious answer.
Yeah.
What I really wish I knew 25 years ago was the value of a network. Mm-hmm. And I've been preaching this to my college-age daughter, and she rolls her eyes until in her junior year, she was able to put people together and was able to secure a position for an internship because she had the connections that they needed to get that done. And all of a sudden she goes, "Oh my gosh, Dad was right. The power of the network." Let me just tell you a quick story about that, because it's really, everybody thinks I'm so worldly and everything, but it's only because I made a lot of mistakes that you're fixing to make. Well, that's a Texas term. That you're getting ready to make. I've already made them and learned from them. So you ever heard of a guy named Barney Zick?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was a guru of gurus, and was an excellent sales guy and toured the country. And he kind of wanted me to take me under his wing and go around. And I said at the time, I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I have young kids, and I'm just not going to do it. But anyway, we were kind of friends, and he died way too soon. But anyway, one time he was giving a seminar, and I called him out, and I said, and he would talk about these deals that we do every day now. And I said, "Barney," I said, "what are you telling people about these deals for? You can only do those deals because you have this network. Those average person out there, they don't have a network like that. They can't pick up the phone and have $100,000 show up the next day." And I just kind of ragged him out a little bit. Well, I was the stupid one, because I didn't know. I should have taken the hint back then that what I needed to do is start establishing and nurturing that network, not saying that, oh, the average Joe couldn't do that deal. Yeah. I didn't get the right message. And so my 21-year-old daughter now has the idea, and I think it'll benefit her life tremendously. Yeah. So that is the easy answer for me. It's the power of a network and the necessity for a network.
Yes.
In anything you do.
That, what's so funny, Quincy, is that we've had several people on the podcast, right? Several guests that, maybe 20, 25 guests that have been on the podcast. And I would say probably a good 3/4 of them, when I ask them this question, it's network. That's exactly, it's such a common denominator with people that have experience and have been arrived to where they have arrived, is because of network, and they always contributed to that. So
right.
Totally. You guys, you've heard it several times. Network equals your net worth. And that's couldn't be more of a true statement. And even at my age, I've learned that over the past couple of years. And it's seriously been, I think, Quincy, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, for me, I think that building your network provides opportunities, just the scale. It's crazy how much, and people just don't think of it that way. They think, oh, I know that person, but do they know you? Do you guys know each other? Do you have a nurture? You've mentioned it several times.
And that's where groups like Good Success come into play, because once you get to the level, not everybody's listening is going to be on that level, but once you get to the level of success that people want you to join a mastermind, then it's a magnifier.
Yeah.
Of your potential to make profit, because you're now all of a sudden getting feedback from people that have had the experience that you want. Because you know what experience is, don't you? Experience is what you get right after you need it. And
interesting.
Of course, what I mean by that is, if you don't have experience rehabbing a house and you do a house, you're about ready to get the experience and that you needed to do the house in the first place.
Yeah.
So networking allows you to sidestep some of that to a certain extent. because you can rely on the experience of other people. You're still going to get the experience, but at least you can get some guidance on what to do. Like, I had a deal that went south and I took the house back, and I've been consulting my network because the house needed a lot of repairs. I've been consulting my network with, well, what level of repair should I do? Should I sell it as is? And getting feedback from people who've already had the experience. So it's an important thing to know.
Absolutely. Man, I love that. That's so good. So guys, make sure you build your network. Now, I know that you had mentioned that people, when you were telling the story with your mentor, that you're like, these people don't have your kind of network, but you got to start somewhere. It all starts with right now.
You're never going to have the network if you don't start nurturing and building it.
Absolutely. Love it. So last and final question that I got for you. So you need to leave our audience here with one thing. So maybe it's a quote, maybe it's a thought that you have, a good piece of advice, one thing that you got to leave our audience with today. What would that be?
Pay your future self first. Do something today that's going to help you tomorrow. Don't spend every penny that you've got, like my youngest daughter has a tendency to do, because, unless you want a really short retirement, you're going to want to eat and travel and have fun and have good health when you're older. And you just have to accept the fact that requires some sacrifice today. So throw a sweet deal or two in your IRA once or twice a year, and you'll be thanking yourself many years in the future. And I know it's hard for a young person to see that, but that's really important.
Yeah, that's incredible. Some really good words of advice, guys. Make sure you take that and apply that today. So Quincy, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We appreciated your company being on here, and we're definitely excited to have you in the mastermind and being a part of our Good Success family. You've always been a part of our family, but officially in the mastermind now, you're there. So we're excited to have you. So
I'll be looking forward to your IRA application.
I'll be sending it in as soon as we're done here.
All right.
So guys, Kevin's going to have it linked below, but questira.com. Quincy, I know that you're a very busy man, but if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do it?
Honestly, the best way is through email.
Okay.
So that's Quincy, Quincy, no E in it, Quincy.long@questira.com.
Awesome.
You can also, I've had some interesting blog posts. I think most of them are still up there. So you can go to askquincy.com or IRAWebAdvisor.com. It's the same, points to the same page. Okay. IRAWebAdvisor.com. And have some interesting questions and answers that I've done over the years.
Awesome.
You might want to check that out.
Okay, fantastic. So Kevin's going to have all that stuff linked below that we just mentioned. So that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Quincy, again, thanks for being on the podcast. We appreciate you being here. We're going to see you next time. Next time we'll see you is in July at the Community Go Giver event.
That's right.
That's exciting. We're excited to have you. So we'll see you then.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, guys. So that's going to do it for today's episode. If you have not already, make sure you are subscribed to the Good Success Podcast. We're on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Kevin's going to have it all linked below. And then we did just mention the Community Go Giver event. That's going to be our next Good Success event in July 25, 26, 27. And it's going to be an incredible event. I know Quincy's super excited. He's about to jump out of his skin. He's so excited. And we're going to have Walter Wofford with the Financial Friends Network there. We're going to be doing this event with him in tandem with him. And then we're going to have several other speakers that you guys just have to go check out the website, communitygogiver.com. We only have 80 seats in grand total available, and that's not what's available right now. So we are selling out quickly. Price is going to go up soon, so make sure you guys go buy your tickets now before it's too late. And then also, if you have not heard about the Good Success Mastermind, make sure you guys go check that out. Quincy did just join us in May and actually join the group right away. And so go to goodsuccess.com/mastermind to find out more about it there. And then you do have to fill out an application for us because we don't just vet the volume of deals that you're doing and what the level of your business, but we also vet the character of who you are. We want people in there that are going to be givers, people that are going to be bringing value to others, and then willing to take and be vulnerable in front of the room and take advice from everybody and help grow their business. So that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did watch Facebook Live, and if you did not, if you missed it, we go live every single Friday at 12 noon Central Time, so make sure you join us on our Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and then look for Your Good Success. So at Your Good Success, and you guys can find us there. So that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening in. And remember, whether you're looking to survive, thrive, or matter, our goal is to provide the tools to reach your vision. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.